Hello, ladies and gents.
Hello.
Welcome to another episode of the Off-Air Voiceover podcast. My name, of course, is Michael.
And I'm Jen. Very excited.
Yeah, we are incredibly grateful to have someone really special in the voiceover industry take the time out to speak to us today, Mr. Justin Sanders from Global.
Hello.
How you doing, Justin?
Good, thank you. Yeah, how are you guys?
Yeah, well, we we know this because we've just been talking before we hit record for about 5 minutes. So
We're giving away the secrets.
Yeah, don't tell them how you make the sausages, Michael.
We'll give them the inside info. Justin, you're head of production at Global. For those of you who may not know much about you, etc., do you want to just give the intro?
So yeah, Justin Sanders, group head of production for Global. I look after the national team of totally including the writers, although I don't look after those directly. We're a team of 16 nationally that work across all aspects of audio. Really, radio is the core.
I bet you guys are so busy, because I imagined you'd be bigger than that, actually. That's like, you must be flat out.
Yeah, to be honest, at times it's like everything. It's a roller coaster. Sometimes it's absolute crazy, and then sometimes it's completely unpredictable. So it really depends what time of year,
Okay.
and how the market's like. Like everyone, we all get affected with ups and downs within certainly decisions in the government and stuff and everything else. So it's it really depends what's going on in the world at the time. But yeah, it's pretty crazy most of the time, I'd say.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier on, before we started, about the concept of this series, we are focusing a lot on casting, and we're trying to get people, well experienced in the industry, in their job roles, who work within casting, just to give us some insight, their opinions that could be of benefit to other voiceovers, some takeaway thoughts, in terms of what you look for, do's and don'ts, etc., etc. So, whilst we've got a few things we want to try and cover, just to kick things off, as in terms of, for somebody who's looking to try and work with Global, let's go straight for the jugular. If someone wanted to try and work with Global, get recognised, what would you say are the bare minimum things you need to find in them as a voiceover?
It obviously Global's a massive business. So there's so many sides to it in terms of different production sides, but in commercially in terms of what me and my team do.
Yeah.
I think really it's we're very fortunate these days. I think to have. When I first started out, I think there was, in terms of agencies for voices, not even, voices for studios at home, what was back in the ISDN days, we had, there was 3 or 4 agencies, and then you had lots of ISDN voices that were often available. But now, you're in a position where there's probably must be 20 or 30 agencies, with some of them got 100 plus on their books. So, there's so much choice. I think often too much choice. I think when you're going through, when you've got a casting brief, sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially for people that are new to the business. Yeah. So I think it's harder than ever, I'd say, to break through. Okay. In terms of an artist. Those probably the days have gone where you used to send availabilities, every week that someone would read. You get so many emails now on a daily basis of people either trying to introduce themselves via the LinkedIn or have got hold of your email and emailed through, and it's. The nature of the business as well is that it's fast moving and we were saying it's often really busy. So I think it's really, really hard to get that. I think it's once you've got that your foot in the door and you've done a job. I think it's just making it memorable more than anything. I think and then people tend to come back.
Yeah.
Do you? So you mainly work through agencies then, or do you? If people contact people via email, do you add them to a list, or what's the deal?
Yeah, we'll often add to a list. We operate slightly differently, I think, to a lot of teams. We do a lot of sort of branded partnership work. So we have a sort of select voices for some of the brands that we're able to choose from that are agreed within departments in the business that match the criteria of the brand. So we work on 2 sides, and then we do external work and we do national work as well. So we're sort of we're juggling three pots really. So. But we do, we do keep a list of voices that I'm really keen where when stuff comes through to try and reply to most emails and get back to people. It's just nature of the beast when when things are really busy, things get missed, or a lot of our email systems now have got a lot the spam filters are a lot better than they used to be, and I lose a lot of stuff in there as well. So a lot of stuff, it's not really rude if I don't get back to people. Yeah, it's just often
I've got
it never
so
came
many
through.
follow-on questions from what you just said.
Yeah, I was going to go on, Jen, you go
So,
first.
I mean, we might be a bit all over the place, so apologies to anyone listening to this. In terms of the brand voices you just said then, so you've got your pool of brand voices. How have you found those? Obviously, they've fulfilled criteria, but like, what's the process of that?
So that has been over a fair few years actually, and it changes as the brand changes. So you'll often look for a little bit like you do when you're searching for music. We get a lot of music publishers coming to us for looking to use their tracks, on commercials. So we'll often give them a criteria of what the brand looks like.
Yeah.
Whether that be like a capital or a heart, and then they will often find music within, that genre and do a bit of a deep dive into that brand. It's a little bit the same with voices, really. Obviously, most of the brands change slightly as they age and the audience changes. But we tend to have a criteria of, an age range often with certain voices. If, we're going to put very different voices on classic to We Are Capital.
Yeah.
So it's really about us, like I said, like with the amount of agencies we've got now, we've got such choice. I think at the moment, even with some of the books we've got, we may have 30 or 40 per brand.
Yeah.
Voices,
so so you've got a spec for a brand, or you're looking for the voice for a brand. Do you then go out to those agencies and say, we've got this we're looking for, send through your top 2 people? Like, what's the process for that?
Yeah, with a lot of new agencies, that's what they do. They'd often say, what kind of things are you looking for? Because obviously some stuff is away from those brands, for, across other audio, and we cast outside of that sometimes as well. But most of the time, an agent will come back and we'll say, these are the core characteristics of what we're looking for in a voice. In this is the sort of station, and they'll often come back with suggestions, and then we'll whittle down the suggestions to what we feel fits. And then it goes through another approval process within the business. So
so is it the brand making that decision then, if you've whittled it down, or is it you guys who are making that decision?
It's a combination. I think a lot of the time the producers will make a call, but we try and keep it as wide as possible, because obviously it's, like I say, the brands do adapt and change just like music does.
Yeah.
And also that it's an interesting space now because it's growing and growing, and niches actually, where we were talking off air as such. Around the word niche, and in podcasting particularly, that's a big thing. And also, if you look at some of the sub brands that have been released now within the 80s, a lot of these sorts of category brands for different genres of music and different decades. We're getting now they're becoming more and more popular. It's really interesting, and other media owners are following suit.
So when you say that about the niche stuff, so how is that voice being categorised for those niches? Is it a very specific style they're looking for? That's like, is there a
often
trend
if it's direct, if it's direct for that brand, if it was something you're doing on one of the 80s stations, obviously you'd be looking for a different voice possibly to something you'd be looking for again for Capital.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably, I think there's probably less sort of. We're making less stuff directly for those at the moment, but I think that will grow. I think a lot of these, they're quite new. So at the moment, a lot of the stuff we cast for is on the main networks.
Okay.
When you said before about you have like your own pool of voiceovers as well, like your own list, like in terms of that, how often do you update that? Do you tend to, like, you've got your core voices that you probably know you can keep going to, you rely on, but do you refresh it very often? Like, obviously, because another thing you mentioned before about your spam filter, so there's a lot of stuff that people might reach out to that you'll never see. So in terms of, well, I'll come back to that in a minute because that's an interesting point. But in terms of like people who do reach out, who are looking to try and join you, is it one in, one out, or do you just like let it?
No. It's constantly growing. I think if it's it's a bit like anything. It's a bit like an agent. When you were approaching an agent as a voiceover, if you send a reel in, and the agent says, unfortunately we've got another someone else just like you.
Yeah.
They don't want they won't want competition within that area. Ours is slightly different because the more voices that we got that fit the brand, the better.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, if we got 7 of the identical, they're all RP. Not that they would be on. But if we were looking for classic, for example, and we've got 7 RP voices, we're probably not going to extend that pool much beyond that.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how much work we've got coming in. Again, if we're absolutely bombarded and we're in the need to constantly. We've got so much stuff that we're creating content-wise that we want to refresh it and keep it. You don't want the same voice on every other ad.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't want that.
No, we've gone through those days back in the noughties.
And so, if somebody's contacting you, you do see the email. Is Is it just radio imaging reels? Like, what's you looking for? Commercial? Is there anything
Commercial
specific?
reels for us.
Yeah.
Commercial reels for us, it would be with commercial and narration. I think narration's a great guide.
Yeah.
And when you're casting, I think you get often a lot of the stuff within commercial reels, depending on where the reel's been done, is quite heightened.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the little nuances that are in a piece of narration or something
that's
more conversational in tone,
Really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
give you a lot more of an insight into the voice.
Yeah.
You often hear a lot more in that.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause sometimes like commercial stuff can it could be quite high energy and your voice is elevated. It's
Or it's
obviously you can have
performance,
different styles
isn't
of
it?
reads,
Rather than
but
yeah.
there's a lot more. Generally, it can be more of a punchiness to it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That because a narration read is more of a guided.
And it can be more personal, I think, sometimes. And obviously, you do get that in commercials. But yeah, that really speaking to one person, and which obviously a good commercial will talk directly to the listener, won't it?
Interestingly, with a commercial reel, then, so is there anything specifically that springs to mind that if you would you receive something that you instantly go, maybe you're not ready, and it could be not necessarily the performance, like the style of the reel, does it sound not very well produced, can things like that be a turn off, or is it is there a standard you expect if someone sends you a reel, basically?
I don't think there's a standard I expect. I mean, I'd expect there to be a good range of stuff on there, so you get an idea for the person.
Yeah.
I think obviously as producers with quality, it would normally be a bit of an issue, but you're looking for the voice behind it. The equipment that you've got to if they're coming in or at home, you can spec that out. So it's not all about the quality necessarily of the recording, but it's hearing the performance in there.
That's really interesting.
And that's more important to me, if I'm honest, in terms of that it's about the voice. We had this conversation before about a lot of websites having photographs of voices on, and when you think about it, really, it's it gives you an idea of what the person looks like, but you're not going to be utilising that in audio.
That's not the reason why you reach out, because of the face. Yeah, that's really interesting though, because I think obviously you do get a lot of information from different sides. One person says to do it this way, one says to do another. And I think that's a really interesting take, because there might be a lot of people that think, well, no, unless I've got my £600 commercial demo all polished, I can't contact anybody. But you actually just made a good point there. Well, if you've got something that, as long as your performance is good, we can figure out the rest when you do an actual job. The idea is just to see how you perform. And I think that's an interesting point as well, because my favourite topic, AI, I always talk about the fact of, especially now that, I will ask your opinion on this because I'm fascinated by this subject, but I've always said that as AI is improving, I think it's more important than ever that voiceovers really work on their craft, because you need your voice to stand out. You need to be able to prove that whilst AI continues to get better in certain nuances, that you all will always be the better option. So that really goes hand in hand with making sure when you do that reel, if for whatever reason your sound quality can't be up there where you'd like it to be, as long as your delivery and performance stands out, that is always going to be the winner.
That's it, and that's 100%. It's all about performance with a reel. At the end of the day, if it's badly recorded and stuff, yes, that can hinder it in terms of someone listening. But if the delivery on the spot that you've put out there is absolutely bang on, and you've hit it and you've hit the brief and it sounds like the brand and it feels, whether it's a demo or a real ad. As long as it feels like a real ad, and sometimes the production varies. You listen to reels, on most sites, you listen to one and you're turning it all the way down, and the next one you put on, you've got to turn it all the way up. So
it's not great, is it?
No, so that's much of a muchness, isn't it? With all of that, but it comes down to performance at the end of the day, I think, and it's your guys' calling card. That's where you're going to get all your work from. So you talk about investment, and it's massively important that, I think, getting it right.
100%.
And it is difficult these days, because casting directors, if I'm honest, it's a real skill set, and it always has been. But I think sometimes maybe some people get a bit lazy these days with casting, and they almost need to be spoon-fed. It happens in acting as well. Yeah. In terms of even though with self-tapes, COVID ended a long time ago, but yet self-tapes are still a thing.
Yeah, I definitely would argue that there's a lot of benefits to self-tapes. I think especially Michael's based in France, actually, so it doesn't really say, but both being northern.
You're
in Manchester at the moment. So obviously a lot of work is still quite London-centric. Obviously Manchester's a big hub as well in terms of radio and global and things as well, isn't it? But definitely self-tapes can be very useful for that initial stage, I think.
Yeah, but I think the cat... Sorry,
go on. Sorry, Michael.
No, you're fine. Go on, carry on.
I was going to say, Jen, I think with it as well, I think the only thing I'd say is you get a different performance.
Yeah.
In front of a director,
Yeah.
the adrenaline's in.
Yeah.
It's a very different performance, and you get
Yeah.
that moment to impress.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. I think motivation-wise, the self-tapes.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would 100% rather be in a studio
Yeah.
because then I'm not worrying about all the tech stuff that I don't want to be worrying about. I just want to be using all my performance energy on that,
Yeah.
And you're right, the adrenaline's going, isn't it? And if you've got self-tape, you massively overthink it. You do it 17
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
and then it goes flat. But sometimes it's not possible, and I do think there's benefits.
Yeah, there's lots of benefits of all of that. I think, like
Yeah.
you say, I think now, with the way that we've changed now in terms of remote, with the remote sessions, a lot more, great things like Riverside and for podcast and Source Connect and.
I love doing that sessions. I think when you self-record, it's just yourself in your little bubble, and you come up with the options you need. But when you jump on, I love it. I love a live session. I love the anticipation of sort of. Well, I was going to say how it goes, but it's more just a case of speaking to people, getting live feedback.
It's the collaboration, isn't it? I mean, we're creatives.
Exactly. 100%. You're right. And I think when we go back to what Michael talked about AI and where people need to be and voices need to be and producers need to be, we shouldn't be in a world today where we're asking voiceovers to self-tape, for commercials or everything. It's about a collaboration because the little nuances in that performance that someone else can hear, you guys can't, and I often, we often work. We'll have a writer in the room with the writer of the script with the producer. Yeah. Because then you've got three heads on it, and then you might have a client interjecting who's dialed in as well. Yeah. So there's, and clients will always have a different opinion. But,
That's why I'm laughing. Yes.
Well, that happened. No, that pretty much exactly happened back in February before I came back from France. I had a live session for a big national campaign for NatWest, and it was literally it was like I said, it was the producer, the writer, client. There was about 6 or 7 people all chat, and then they were making changes on the spot and sort of tweaking things here and there. I loved it. I was like, I love that collaboration. You know what I mean? And it's fantastic. Just two things I want to quickly ask you before I forget, because I these things stay in my brain and then they just float away into the ether, never to be seen again. So while I've got it in my mind, one was trends. Are you seeing anything that's changing? Because I heard something recently on another podcast. They were talking about how the conversational read is slowly morphing into something more like even more natural. So like like user-generated content, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something you'll probably see more commercially. I think if you look at podcasts now, and the way that obviously that's grown hugely, and the takeoff of that, and you look at now that that the audience are used to host reads now with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's baked in.
Some of them are awful though. When I hear
they are.
And I'm like, oh no.
Listens to Stick to Football, Gary.
Yeah, you can tell the difference though. You can hear some of the ones that are, that have been heavily scripted or and I think and there's others that do it really well where it becomes part of it and you almost forget it's an ad.
Yeah, because it feels like it's a personal recommendation from them and you already trust them. So why wouldn't you buy this thing?
But that's the whole thing. Kind of goes. Slightly going back, because I do want to touch on the AI stuff a little bit more, but this kind of blends into that. I think the key thing is, when we said before about working on your performance, people buy off people, and that very much is so relevant with your voiceovers. I think, as I've seen some of these trends go now, like you said, Justin, about podcasts now, they read the ads themselves, because they've invested in, if somebody's going to invest their time listening to people, they appreciate what you're saying. So if you then have an advertisement within that, people are going to be more engaged. And I think as hear more adverts on the radio and stuff like this delivery where it sounds like a person really talking to you, like obviously it's a performance per se, but there's just a little extra nuance to it now that's not where it used to be as the traditional conversational. It's just something a bit more personal with it. And I think what I've found, and this is why with the AI thing, this is what I've been saying for a long time, because the reason why I'm fascinated about it, because I always like to hear other people's opinion on it, and obviously it's constant talk of a topic there that we talk about, and the reason why I keep saying to people to not worry about too much is simply because, like, with AI, whilst it does improve, there's always, I feel like it's limited by the very nature of what it is. It's artificial. It goes off what it's being fed as information, it churns it out and regurgitates it into something else. But there's always going to be that line it can't cross, which is do something inventive itself. Think on its feet.
Yeah.
Give you something more profound. And as people, obviously, we can do that. We can have those little nuances that make something more personable. But from your perspective, like with the AI thing, what are you seeing with this? Have you seen people move over to it? And
yeah, I mean, there's lots
jobs?
of areas that I think have adapted and started utilising it. You know, I think in post-production AI has been utilised for a while in terms of noise cleanup. You know, most people now wouldn't even know, but you know, a lot of the noise cleanup tools, particularly they use, are AI based.
Yeah.
You know, and I think voice is will change. You know, without doubt in the future. And that, you know, there's lots of companies now set up. There doesn't a week go by where someone doesn't send you an email with a new product that they want to showcase on how it will record and produce the ad.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the stuff that's out there. And like you said, I think at the moment, I think it's what we have to think is AI is at the worst point it is at the moment.
Yeah.
It's never going to be. It will only get better.
Yeah.
You know, and it will learn and adapt. But I think you're right. I think there's something certainly in humanness, and I think when you look at the way that you know Gen Z and Gen Alpha now, and I think you know a lot of the kids now talk about community, and even they're going to clubs now where they you know they play chess or they play board games now.
Yeah.
It's about a group and a collective.
Yeah.
And I think there's a
community.
humanness connection, yeah, and I think that's the thing with voice as well. And I think you're right. I think that's where, you know, yes, AI can, you know, is getting better and it can now deliver emotion and stuff in some respects, but there's still a lack of connection, I think, for certain things.
Yeah.
I think it can do basic messaging very well.
I think because the flip side of that is with the Gen X and Gen Alpha, that right, Z and Alpha, is that they hear it all the time on TikTok and things like there's it becomes norm, doesn't it, to hear an AI voice doing a narration over it. It doesn't jar in the same way that it might do for us because you're just used to it. So I think there's both of those things working in tandem, isn't it? Is the desperate need for community and connection, but also the kind of familiarity with AI voices.
Well, that's why I think.
That's
what,
sorry,
when you say about the human thing, this is exactly why. And I'm not naive. I'm well aware that it'll have an impact. I'm not daft, but at the same token, I just don't think it'll be the job killer that some people catastrophize about. Because for a couple of reasons. One, like I said before, there are some people where an AI voice will just be good enough, but they're largely like what some people might say the low-hanging fruit jobs, where you know it doesn't require much skill or performance element to it. Something very generic will suffice. But the stuff that requires real connection, which is a lot of voiceover work these days, where you do need to have that human connection. As long as you work on your craft, then you're always going to be better than AI because you can do something it can't. But the second thing is, if people do get flooded with AI content, and you see it now sometimes, like I see if you go on YouTube, there are countless companies, I say countless, there's quite a few companies that use AI videos. You look at the content and the feedback is overwhelmingly negative. Yeah. And I think the problem is, if you try and shove it down people's throat and try and normalise generic content, when people hear something that is real and it is profound, it'll have such an effect. They're like, I want more of that because it resonates so much more. And I feel like it might get worse before it gets better. And I think eventually you'll find a middle ground where a lot of companies go, and I've seen it now. I've got clients who said that we tried the AI voice, it just simply doesn't work, but we use it as a scratch read, so we know what we roughly want.
Yeah.
And then we bring you in, and the amount of work I get now where they send me the video with a scratch AI voice, and some of it I was like, I mean, to be fair, it's a scratch for an AI voice. Fair enough, it's all right. But what I find is that, because I saw one the other day for an F1 film, and I thought where it starts off with this really strong voice. I was like, wow, okay. But then actually you realise 30 seconds in, you don't get anything different. It's the same all the way through.
No, it's one level. Yeah, I mean, and there's also, don't forget, there's a lot of tweaking going on behind the scenes to even get that. You know, it's not just a straight delivery. And the other thing I think, when we're talking about voice and AI, I think obviously there's the two sides. There's text to speech and speech to speech. Now they're very different. Now text to speech is when you're just, you type in the script that you want and it delivers it, and it's very formulaic, and it feels quite full. There's a lot of work to be done on it, I think, to get a reasonable basic messaging. Yeah. I think speech to speech is where it really does come to life. But the interesting thing with that is you need a performance. So it's where you'd pay a voice or an actor to come in and deliver the performance. You know? So yes, it could be performed by the writer, but it's going to be very different to an actual performance. So I think it shoots itself in the foot a little there.
So then, with that in mind, so going back to what you said before about working on your craft, obviously from your side of the fence, can you, Can you spot a reel, like, compared to what the competition is now? If you do hear something where somebody's still early in their journey, do you think, okay, well, we can bring them onto the list in case something comes up, or do you literally have to cast them to one side and see how they are maybe a year or 2 years time if they reach out? Like, because the competition is so stiff now, like, you quickly identify someone who's not quite ready.
I think sometimes sometimes in the reel you can hear that. It's difficult. I mean, a lot of people come into this, even with the reels with, and I think maybe they jump in too soon, without the practice and stuff first. And that happens a lot, but you can hear that. And I think the problem is with the nature of a lot of the work as well, it's often quite fast turnaround. So it is difficult then when you've got to, really, really work to get a read out of someone. And as you guys will know, a lot of the session times vary dramatically depending on what you're doing. For a script, in terms of, some 10, 15 minutes, others, you're the full hour, and they're working on getting that readout.
It's normally about 6 minutes or something, and you're like, "Are you sure you got what you want?" And they're like, "I've got everything. Bye." And you're like, "Bye." It's this panic-inducing, like, but you have to just trust the producers, like they've got what they need and they go. But that's how quick it is. It's just so fast-paced.
The reason why I mention that is because, this is more sort of centred around people who are very new into it. The reason why I mention that is because I'm a big advocate for don't try and run before you can walk. If you're not fully ready and you try and contact production houses, say, listen to my work, because the competition is so stiff, you're not going to make things worse for yourself, but you won't be helping yourself either. And similarly, if you do manage to get through the door and maybe blagged the experience you've got, if you then get picked for something and you're in that session, like I say, and that inexperience shows through, and they're making things way more harder and longer than they should do. Harder and longer. Oh, God, what a better phrase. They make things more hard work for everyone. Again, that's just going to be a pushback. But from your perspective, somebody comes through the door, said they got this XYZ experience, turns out they don't, and they're struggling to get the read right. It's not a good look.
No, there's nothing worse than that. If I'm honest, there's nothing worse than you're going for a reel, getting this guy or this girl's perfect. Amazing. We'll get them in, and then you find out in the session that the reel's taken 8 weeks of practice and it wasn't recorded. They've had time to go through every script, read after read, and a reel should never be done that way. For me, a reel is about a performance done on the day. They shouldn't even see scripts before a session, if I'm honest.
I
think you've got to trust in the person producing the reel.
Yeah.
I think if they're good enough, put the trust in them, and they know their stuff, and they've got the experience in the industry. Because there's lots of cowboys out there doing stuff, and charging the earth for it. So I think it's about making sure that the material is spot on for a voice. They've done their due diligence in terms of sourcing great stuff.
Yeah.
And it's about crafting that out in the time frame, because it needs to whatever they've done there needs to be translatable. The minute they walk into that first session, whether that's in person or at home, they need to be able to drop, and you go, "Oh, that sky read you did," and they were like, "Oh yeah, they had the warmth in it." Okay,
that is really interesting. I think I just read my commercial demo actually with Martin Fisher at Sonic Pond, who I think is amazing. And one of the things he was saying was that he'll often have people coming to him and who've chosen scripts that are completely out of their casting bracket. That they would never get cast for, because obviously you've got your criteria, haven't you? You'd be like, "Oh, I'm looking for this kind of voice of this or this age," and they've chosen something completely, not that. And he's trying to like, well, maybe you wouldn't get cast for, this 20-year-old because you're 60 or whatever. So that I think that's quite interesting in terms of where you're putting people. But can I ask one follow-up question then? So imagine you've got this email, it's got through the spam filter. You've listened to the reel, you think, "My God, this is amazing." What happens next to it? Are you sharing it with all the producers? Do you have like every month? What's the plan?
We have a group. Within the production team in London and Manchester, and then that would be shared within those guys. Most of the guys would do their own casting.
Okay.
Dependent on the criteria of what the job. Often we would send voices. If it's an external job, particularly, clients would be sent a range of voices often to make the decision. A lot of it again comes down to avails with some of these things as well. Yeah. If it's very last minute, and the nature of the business as it can be,
Yeah.
But they would normally go into a pool for the guys to go, okay, yeah, that sounds great. I wouldn't mind giving those guys a run out on this, this next project, or I think they could fit well into this.
Okay, so it's kind of ad hoc.
It does make it, yeah. And we have got lots of voices that have come. We work a lot with agency voices. I mean, we've moved to a model now where we're getting more and more people back through the door face to face. Certainly.
Oh, that's cool.
And I'm a big advocate of that. I think you can get a different level of performance face to face. I think there's certain things, even in a session where you've got a lot of clients in a room.
Yeah.
And the voice you can see is maybe struggling to take some of the direction. I always thought the producer or the engineer is almost like a translator.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes you can just see visually through the glass at someone, and you go, they haven't got a clue what they're saying, have they?
Okay.
Because it's not clear.
Yeah.
So you can almost, there's certain little. I always think there's certain signs within that you can approach.
Is it that blank expression where someone's like, "Oh my god, what do they just?"
They're nodding. They nod a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
There's nothing better than I think actually when you sometimes when a client's fed back on something during a recording. And it's not clear what that feedback is.
Yeah.
It happens with agencies as well. I think sometimes, even if the engineer's struggling, I think playing back the voice to the voiceover, often half the time they'll twig.
You can hear it yourself, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's true. That because in the moment you it's all in real time, but then it's when you're able to hear it back to it, you can critique it so much differently.
Because sorry.
No, it's okay. I was
just really. Told you this would happen.
Right,
really quickly. I think sometimes you had an idea and you think, oh, I'm doing this a certain way. That's what you hear in your head, don't you? And then you listen back, you're like, oh no, I did not nail that. So sometimes you have to hear it back, don't you, to actually hear it how it comes across rather than how you're feeling at the moment.
Yeah, and that's where you talked about earlier about recording, being sent a script and recording it as well. Where I think it falls down a lot of the time because it's very difficult to hear that, And I think your voices are booked because of the performance they deliver.
Yeah.
There should always be a director at the other end.
Yeah.
Working that through because they know the brand, they know hopefully the product, and they've had some input or certainly seen it maybe at scripting stage.
Yeah. What the kind of nuances that you're going that we might not have all that information. I suppose we wouldn't.
Yeah,
have all
we've got a duty. We've got a duty to lift. Michael talked earlier about voices now need to lift their game with AI.
Yeah.
And it's no different to producers and production houses.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
There's a lot. If you listen through a lot of content, it's quite bland. If I'm honest, across all audio. But we have a duty of care, I think, to lift the quality of that up there. And like Michael said, the audiences as well. There's a demand for that, and I think we don't want people to turn off.
Goodness, no, that's the whole point is that they don't.
Yeah. So
we've all not done our jobs.
Yeah, it's about improving that. The quality of everything, and I think the collaboration I think is a big key to that.
Yeah, and that's what's exciting, isn't it? Seeing like, actually, what can we do with this? Because it's obviously a medium that's been around for a long time. Like, how do we keep upping it and making it better?
Well, I think that's like I was saying before, though. I think you will find that. I mean, I don't know this. I'm sort of guessing, but if some people do take the easy route and use ChatGPT, for example, to pull together a script, and it is relatively generic in content. If you get a lot of that, and then somebody writes this unbelievably great script, and you think, wow, that jumped out. And then you realise, and that was all because a human did it. I think that's what I was saying before. I think you'll find that the good, profound human content will stand out so much more, and then there'll be just a push for it. You know what I mean? But I think it's like you said, it's important across the board for people to always keep pushing and leveling up because we've got a different type of competition now, and it is there, and it's here to stay, and it's going to keep getting better. But we all benefit if everyone keeps leveling up their own game in whatever department. We all generally benefit.
Yeah.
Consumers benefit. You're leveling up your own skills. So I think it's but it's never more important than to work on your craft.
Can I change the subject slightly then? So, slightly off piece. Do you get involved in terms of most of us would love to do kind of station voice, radio imaging type thing? Are you involved in that process as well, or is that?
No, not at all. Not. Well, obviously we have to steer clear of voices that are station voices because then you get into a whole other area of problems where sound like the part of the station,
and they're confused like what channel am I on now? Because I'm sure no, that makes sense.
Yeah. So no, it's nature of the way things have grown and the brand, the scale of them now is that each of those departments have production teams and heads of
Okay, we've been sent quite a few questions. So that was one of the questions that someone's asked. So I'm just making sure we're covering everything. I know what you can't see me, but I'm just checking.
Well, so while you check your
you
questions, we have a little segment on our
Ooh,
podcast.
is it time?
And I believe we're at that moment where we will do it. So, ladies and gents, it is time for Voiceover of the Week.
Sorry,
like,
Justin looks so nonplussed then. It's brilliant. Sorry, probably should have warned you we do this halfway through.
So what we do is every week or every episode we go through social media and we just go for pick out a piece of work that we just felt we wanted to give a nod to, say how great we thought it was, and give a shout out to the voiceover behind it. This week it's my turn. This week my voiceover of the week is none other than Kelly McBride. You are my voiceover of the week. Now the reason why I've picked Kelly is because she posted something on Instagram not long ago. She is narrating this kids series called Koala Shine, and when she put in the caption, she was explaining about it. She has to do over 200 voices, and I think whilst we there's voiceover work where it's like you can do something that's emotive and profound, etc. There's such an incredible skill in being able to narrate these series and do all these different voices and still keep the listener engaged. And I think it's an exceptional talent.
Yeah, phenomenal.
So whilst I can't get anywhere near all the voices she's done, I've just done a little montage of 20 seconds of some of the voices, because I think, like I said before, the ability to narrate, switch to these different characters and still keep the performances on cue, I think is amazing. So Kelly, you are my well-deserved voice of the week, and this is a little segment of what I've got.
Oh, you got nothing to be scared about, darling, her grandma told her with a chuckle. So, what's the lesson of Little Red Riding Hood then, Grandma? Welcome to the neighborhood, Pinguino, he said. I'm sorry I've yet to make your acquaintance, huh? Rollo, trust me, if I know one thing about show business, it's this. Oh, they're not the kind of weaves we'd ever expect to find here in Lapland.
So, oh, no, it's going to play again. No, it's not. So Kelly, you're my voice of the week. I thought that was excellent. I thought the idea that's not even scratching the surface of how much you actually do. I just think it's a tremendous skill and tremendous effort. So you're my voice of the week.
Amazing, well done.
So, questions that you've got. You got more?
Okay, we've covered actually loads of them, but another question which I don't think we've really covered is, obviously, you've mentioned before, you work with some huge brands now on Global, and someone's asked, are these brought in ready-made, or do you do any of like the making and the casting of these as well? It's
a mixture, to be honest.
Yep.
Some, like I said, some stuff is sort of in more of a partnership space that we work on, where they're sort of co-branded.
Yeah.
And then some stuff is direct. Some stuff we work with agencies on. We'll white label. So it's really varied. Some already come with voices attached to brands. Mm-hmm. Can you work with so and so on this? So otherwise with some we make suggestions on casting for as well. So it really depends on what it is, what day it is, and what's come through the door.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Oh, it's fascinating though. I feel like there's so much that we could. So I would just love. I know we're kind of going back to the beginning again, and I promise I won't keep you for too long. But I would love to know, like, what is your role involved? Like, what is it a week for you? What's that like?
So it's changed, I think, dramatically. I think as we've grown. I mean, I'm a big fan of still. I'm not as hands-on as I used to be. I used to be sat in the studio and.
Yeah.
And directing and mixing, post-mixing all the time. And now it's far more of a role, I think, overseeing where we're going next, what work's coming in, trying to educate clients on the importance of audio and the importance of voice,
right,
particularly, and human truths and storytelling.
Human truths, I love it.
And there's lots on
some good buzzwords.
it's my job's full of buzzwords.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's half the time it's like anything. It's trying to educate. A client might have a very visual brand, and it's looking at how does that sound? What does that sound like? And how can it come to life? And could be a car. It could be a car brand where it's all about the visuals, and they're like, oh, you can't do anything in sound with it. So it's almost proving those guys wrong and saying, well, actually, we can.
Yeah, you can.
Just hold my pen. We just.
Just out of interest, do you have of the voices that you know of? Like, if you get an ad brief that comes through and you think straight away, I think I might know the right voice for that. And just for whatever reason, let's just say it wasn't what you thought it might be, and you can't find who you're looking for. Do you ever go on things like social media and just see who's out there, who's posting work, just see if you can find any inspiration?
Yeah, sometimes I think. Often you'll see stuff in. It may be like maybe social, it may be TV, where you've seen some. Years ago we used to create sort of up and coming lists of things. You see people in soaps, or and you'd go, okay, they've got one amazing voice they've got, or you hear something, and you go, they've got an amazing voice. So you make a note, of that for.
Would you ever reach out to them? Then
sometimes, sometimes it depends on the project. It's we'd often be able to find it. Most of them would have attached, if they were acting, would have attached agents. So
of course, yeah.
You could often find them, but it really depends on. I think these days we'll probably do less on social because of the turnarounds. In terms of hearing voices like that, most of it was stuff that's come through the door, maybe through email or through. Going through different agent sites in terms of looking for casting suggestions, and even with that, you may make a note. You may have been sent an email with someone with their new reel, and you might go through a list and go, they've got a really interesting voice, or so you maybe make a note for later. It might not be for this project, but you might come back to it. So I think it's all about exposure as well. All of these things, I think the great thing is a lot of the team. We've got probably 8 of the team cast, so we've got varying degrees. Yeah, and the writers do cast as well, depending on the project. So that opens up, but on a day-to-day basis, with a lot of the stuff we do, where the producers will often be in charge of the casting.
Yeah.
But that's a really broad range, because some people have got 25 years in experience in casting, and others have got 2 years maybe. Yeah. And the age range is wide as well. So I think what that means is we get a variety of different opinions and voices, and and I think that's only beneficial, because I think it opens the playing field up.
Yeah. So we mentioned before that you and I met at one of the, I can't think, One Voice or Vox or something originally.
Yeah, Vox in October, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, because I know that people listening, a lot of people want to work with Global. So people approach you with these kind of events. Do other producers go to these kind of events? What's the polite way of getting? Do you prefer emails? Like what's
yeah,
your preference?
I think emails are it's like everything. Like I say, it's tough. I think when so much is going on, and what it's like with probably with response rates from a lot of emails that go out. It's tricky because everyone's so busy, and and it does fluctuate obviously. And when people get more downtime, is often when they'll come back to people, but that could be often a month. But no, in terms of going to some of the industry events, probably less these days. Like everything, it's it's been tough in the last couple of years with budgets and stuff like everybody's
definitely.
found. Yeah. So there's there's less opportunity to go to some of the paid events. Mm-hmm. I know some people go to some of the social events that are obviously available. Where they meet up often, where possible. But I'll still try and go where possible to these things, to any of the events really, because I've been in the industry for a long time now, and it's I think it's
you're part of the crew, aren't you? Really?
And it's just I just love voice, and I think I think it's such a skill set that it's it continually evolves, and and I think with AI around the corner, like we've discussed, for a large part of this, I think it's about elevating that game and improving what we all do for the love of the industry.
And I think that's something that I would love to have a bit more of, because obviously we have loads of voice events that occasionally producers come along to. I would love there to be like a producer event that I'm able to access, and not to be like, oh, here's my card, but just to learn about what's going on and what's it like, and the kind of shared issues and stuff that you guys have. I think that's the more that I know about that, and for engineers as well, the more I know about it, the better I am at my job, because I can adapt and support where it's necessary.
I think it's interesting as well, because as trends change, it's always, again, this is part and parcel why we've done this season largely around casting, because people we're speaking to are looking for slightly different things as trends emerge, and I think it's a fun way of trying to sort of stay ahead of that curve and know more or less what are people looking for, how can you adapt to it to make sure you can still be seen, be noticed, be heard, etc. I think so. I don't know of any things like that, but I know what you mean, Jen.
Justin, is there anything like that?
Not that I know of. There's obviously, it's changed drastically in the last sort of 20 years, and even industry events now in terms of, there's lots of award shows. There's different award show every week, it feels like, for something else. So it's tricky, I think, to see how you sit that. You know, I know Vox a few years ago tried to get more producers back.
Yeah.
But I think the pool has shrunk a little, and I think there's a lot of independence now. And I think it's hard. I think like everything, you know, within you know all areas of it, budgets often
everything's
don't
got
allow
smaller,
for
isn't
it, and nothing's cheap, is it these days? You know,
No.
they try and do it. Obviously, the events at a great price so that it's easy for people to do. But even that, I think, can be a stretch for some.
Yeah,
So,
of course, yeah.
Just one thing before
go on. Sorry.
Before I let you go, I was going to say was just because you said then about your love of voice and love of industry, what to you when you hear it makes you think that was a bloody great ad? Is there anything that stands out?
Well, I think you can hear. You can hear collaboration. I think in some things. I think you know when a voice has been directed. You know when often when a writer's been involved at some point. You know, even with the flow of certain things. And I think you can probably listen to some stuff, and you can probably, you know, if you were to guess the time frame it took in recording and post, I think you can hear it.
Yeah.
I bet you can hear it. I'm not sure I could tell how long something takes to do in post, but that's amazing.
So I think it's about collaboration and craft. I think with an ad, and it's about a performance, and it's something, you know, we talked earlier about different audiences now, and about the, you know, that we don't want ads to be not heard. You don't want people to skip, you know. I mean, in audio, they can't skip, but they can turn off.
Yeah.
Tune out, you know, in terms of listening. And that's what you don't want. So I think that in terms of a good ad, I think that's what you want, something that engages a listener.
Yeah. So what are you excited about? Like, what have you got coming up? What is it you were like, you know?
Oh, what are we excited about? What have we been? I mean, it's been just crazy sort of busy. Like, you know, we've had a run where it things dropped off, and then it got really busy, and now we're in a point where it feels like we're running, you know, at full pell.
Yeah.
I think I'm excited about, you know, where we go with it. I think some of the technology is going to be really helpful, and you know, even within AI, I think for post production, for you know, and I think for things like, you know, where you'd often be recording a voice, and maybe the soundproofing and stuff wasn't quite good enough, or, you know, you're recording something on location. We've done that a lot. You know, you're able now to clean up audio, you know, unlike ever before. So the tools we've got at our disposal to elevate the game, you know, are fantastic. And I think that's what it's about. I think it's about us pushing the game up. And I think, I mean, I'm really excited by a lot of the audiences coming through, the demographics that are coming through, that we're going to have to really work on to keep in terms of advertising and ads. You know, and it's about storytelling, about using the medium to its full potential.
Yeah.
Do you, in terms of storytelling, I think that's a really, like when you feel like you listen to a person and you take them on a little bit of a journey, even if it's inside 30 seconds, that's really compelling. I love those.
Yeah.
When you're talking about your audiences, are you researching those new audiences? Or like, is someone giving you research documents that say, this is a brief on Gen Alpha, this is what they like, this is what they don't like, or whatever? Do you have teams?
I think internally there's teams that do that.
Yeah.
You know, that obviously that for you know, for our output and everything. So there's teams that are already looking at, you know, where we're going to be in you know, in so many years. And there's lots of studies online. You know, I think if you need to look through a lot of the sites in terms of audience, there's something in a Media Leader each week, you know, normally on a study that's been done on where audiences, you know, and you see trends form, you know, with the podcasting now in terms of that need. You know, it's not a one size fits all mentality to everything now. It's, you know, there's niches. You know, you look at a podcast on bird watching and the amount of people that now tune into that. You know,
I mean, I'm actually tempted now you said that. Not even thought about it.
There you go. So it's
if I've learnt nothing else from this podcast.
Bird watching's where it's at.
Yeah. I'll be Twitcher this time next year.
Not in a windowless studio, it's not, but yeah.
Oh, this has been so interesting.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
There's been loads of really good information I think a lot of people can take away from it, and I think it's it's been really insightful. So sincerely, thank you so much for your time, Justin.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your enthusiasm. Obviously, not just for our podcast, but just for the industry as well. And like, it does feel like when you do come to these events and things, you're so generous with your time, but also just your energy. Like, it's really nice. So thank you for that.
Thank you. No, thank you. I think it's, you know, I think everyone within the industry is a wonderful bunch, and I think, you know, we've you know, when we go back to it, I think we've all got a duty to, you know, to lift the industry up and keep moving it forward, and, you know, keep delivering great material, you know, and that's with voice and post together.
Yeah. And I think the producers that I've worked with at Global, I've not worked with loads, but have all been excellent as well. So I think it's you've got a good team.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll wrap it up there. So, right, thanks very much for listening, folks.
Thank you.
Justin, thanks again for taking the time to chat with us today. And folks, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Bye.
See you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.